Well, good morning, everybody, and good morning to the people that are online. Today we are continuing our series as we work through the book of Acts. And today we're looking at Acts chapter 7, and we'll briefly go over what Acts chapter 7 is about. And in particular, we're looking at persecution and expanding from what we can learn in Acts into other parts of the New Testament and as far as Christian persecution goes. So in Acts chapter 7, and if you have got your Bibles, you're welcome to turn there. Acts chapter 7. And a summary of Acts chapter 7 is Stephen was a deacon in the early church, and he had angered members of various synagogues with his teachings about Jesus. So this was the very beginning of Christianity going out into the world after Jesus had ascended into heaven. And of course, there was a lot of pushback from the Jewish religion, and he was brought before the Sanhedrin and accused of blasphemy against Moses and God and of the temple. And Stephen responds by denouncing the Jewish authorities and points out that it is they who are rejecting God, what God's doing. And we can turn to chapter 7 and read from 51 through to 60. And for the new people here today, I'm not a very good reader. You just have to bear with me. I've struggled my whole life with reading, but we'll see how we go anyway. You stiff-necked people, your hearts and ears are uncircumcised. You are just like your ancestors. You always resist the Holy Spirit. Was there ever a prophet your ancestors did not persecute? They even killed those who predicted the coming of the righteous one, and now you have betrayed and murdered him. You who have received the law that was given through the angels, but have not obeyed it. When the members of the Sanhedrin heard this, they were furious and gnashed their teeth at him. But Stephen, full of the Holy Spirit, looked up to heaven and saw the glory of God and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. Look, I see heaven opened up and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. So you can imagine the scene. He was on trial. He was defending himself, and these people were very, very enraged, and I guess they didn't understand he was saying. They certainly didn't believe it. When Stephen had said that, look, he said, I have seen heaven open up and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. At this they covered their ears, yelling at the top of their voices as they rushed at him, dragged him out of the city and began to stone him. So it's pretty horrific. And as far as what we can understand with the Bible, Stephen was probably the first Christian to be killed for preaching the gospel, if you like. Why do you think when it says here, at this they covered their ears and yelling at the top of their voices, why do you think they were covering their ears? Any ideas?
They just killed Jesus. He was a holy man, not being the hand swallow.
mean, I guess it's speculation, but what they were listening to, well, what they were hearing was just absolute hate speech, and they certainly didn't believe it. And what I see is there's a spiritual battle going on, and here Stephen was speaking the absolute truth, but the truth that he was speaking, they couldn't even bear to listen to. And as somebody who goes out on the street preaching, I've seen this several times. I've seen people when I say, hey, I've got good news and I'm bringing the good news of the gospel, and on many times I've had people start screaming. I've had people put their car horn on and just leave it on because they cannot stand what you're about to say. I've had people on big motorbikes, or cars, race their car engines to try and out drown what you're saying. And I think just a lot of that is there is a spiritual battle going, and when we are preaching the truth of Jesus, we've got to expect that there is going to be, from certain people, there's going to be major pushback. If we go to the next one there, Zach. Should Christians today expect persecution? So to help us answer this question, we'll look at some of the passages in the Bible where Jesus is teaching or warning, if you like, telling his disciples when they go out what they should expect. If we go to the next one there. So if we'll turn to, we don't even need to turn there really. So we'll look at Matthew 24. Would somebody like to read that, Kayla?
As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Tell us, they said, when will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Jesus answered, watch out that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, claiming I am the Messiah, and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other. Many false prophets will appear and receive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved.
So I wonder, when Jesus told this to his disciples, I wonder how they reacted. He says, then you'll be handed over to be persecuted and put to death. This is before Jesus was this is leading up to Jesus being arrested, but this is before he's been arrested. So none of this had happened. So they must have been looking at each other thinking, well, I hope he's wrong. If we go to the next slide there, Zach. And Jesus continues. This is in John 15. So we've got John 15. When we get to John 17, that's Jesus praying in the garden. So this is right before he gets taken in and to be tried. So Jesus says to his disciples, if the world hates you, keep in mind it hated me first. If you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you. Remember what I have told you. A servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you also. If they obeyed my teaching, they will obey yours also. They will treat you this way because of my name, for they do not know the one who sent me. So these people that are that will be opposing the disciples or the apostles as they go out and start sharing the gospel. What does Jesus say? Why they're going to be persecuted? He says, "For they do not know the one who sent me." Who sent Jesus? God. So these people, these are the Jewish leaders. They think they know God, but Jesus is saying they don't know God. If we go to the next one there, Zach. So that's what Jesus had warned his disciples. He had told them, "You're going to be in for some hard times. You're going to be in for some persecution. You're even going to lose your lives." That's what he said. So we know that from church history and a lot of the early historical writings, and also what was written in the New Testament, that Stephen, James, Peter, and James, the brother of Jesus, they all lost their life in various ways, and so did the rest of the 12, and including Paul. I think that John was the only one who was spared from actually being killed. So the warnings that Jesus had given his disciples when they were the apostles, and after Jesus had ascended to heaven, in Acts there was a lot of persecution. So what about Christians today? What does that mean? Is there? This was the early church, and clearly there was a lot of persecution there. What about Christianity today? Are we still? Should we still expect persecution? Are we still being persecuted? So Christianity is widely cited by international bodies and human rights organisation as the most persecuted religion, but I did a little bit more research there, even the most persecuted organisation in the world is Christianity. Christians are more persecuted than any other group in the world today. And the figures are pretty staggering. Today, an estimated 388 million Christians worldwide expect high levels of persecution and discrimination, with roughly 4,800, which is about 13 people every day of the year, killed, and thousands of churches attacked annually. You can look up, using your phones, you can look up 50 of the most persecuted countries, the 50 countries with the highest persecution towards Christianity in your Bible, and it also shows how these various countries do persecute the Christians, and it's from execution right down to just is it segregation, the word? Because you're a Christian, you've got a different set of rules, and there's a lot of there is a lot of persecution going on in the world today. So what about the rest of the world? There's a lot of countries, including New Zealand, where as Christians, Christianity isn't persecuted. And just here in the Waikato, they estimate there's between 150 and 200 Christian churches just throughout the Waikato. So Christianity is legal here, and it's certainly not. There's not the persecution at all. So, do you think in light of the New Testament, do you think it's more surprising that there are countries in the world today that are heavily persecuted, or do you think it's more surprising that there are countries like New Zealand where there's supposedly no persecution at all? What's anybody got any thoughts on that?
Blessing.
Pardon? It's yeah. It's a blessing. Yeah. No, sorry. That's all good. No, I myself, looking at the New Testament, looking at what Jesus warned his 12 followers, what they would be facing, and then seeing they did face that, they did lose their lives, and that is Christianity. And we've got the same message today. So I think it's probably more expected that Christianity still would have a very heavy persecution rather than the countries like New Zealand or Australia or many countries throughout the world today where there is no persecution. One interesting thing is you take, let's say we take the 150 churches in the Waikato today, and some of them are very big. I know some of them are well over 1,000 people in Hamilton, and some of them are much smaller. Now, if you take a passionate Christian who believes that the Father alone is God, and he or she is part of one of these churches, and he or she starts to question some of their doctrines, what do you think happens? Like many of us, it's a little bit difficult because I've got this couple here, and I don't know what your beliefs are. As a church, we believe that the Father alone is God, and what happens if you are to challenge one of these, churches about their doctrine, some of the doctrines? Any ideas? Pardon?
You're not allowed to.
No, you're not allowed to question it. Yeah, there's a lot of that would be right. So, for us, a lot of us, I know, a lot of us have faced a lot of persecution. And okay, we might not be dragged out and stoned like Stephen was, or crucified like Jesus was, or killed like many of the disciples was. But a lot of us, because of our clear understanding of the Bible and because of the position that we take and our passion for truth, if you're to go into one of the many churches in New Zealand, and it's no different than Australia or America, or I've heard testimonies all around the world, in a way, we are persecuted by our own religion, if you like, by Christianity. And what I just wanted to recognise is that is a real thing, and I just want for us to realise, in a way, even in the countries where Christianity is legal, in a way, there's still a group of Christians that are being persecuted. In fact, maybe even from their own religion, if you like. So if we click forward, Zach, so how can we cope with persecution? That's what I want to look at. Like, as Christians, we're persecuted in many different ways. How can we cope with persecution? I want to give a little illustration of 30 years ago, right smack about now, so what are we is it the 21st of June, Sharon and I, but it was probably more just Sharon and I were farming. We'd started farming. We're about 3 years into our farming, and we'd finished our first year of share milking. We'd bought 300 cows. We were up to here in debt. Taking inflation into consideration, we were well over $1 million in debt, equivalent to today. We were paying quite high interest there. And we had just finished our first year of share milking. And share milking is where you sign an agreement that you own the cows and you're working on you're farming a farmer's farm, and you a landowner's farm, and you go halves on the income and you run the farm. And we was in our second winter there, and that year we had about 240 millimetres of rain. We was on a flat farm at Oreni, which is sort of central Waikato. The whole region was completely waterlogged, and in June we had about 20 or more severe frosts. So the conditions were horrific, and I was running out of ideas. We were slowly destroying our farm because the farm was so wet and the cows were pugging it up. Many of the farmers in our areas was really, really, really struggling. In fact, a young couple about 9 or 10 kilometres from us, back towards Taupiri, they had bought a farm 3 years earlier, and they had struggled with the winter the year before with a lot of rain, and then this year was probably twice as worse. And unfortunately, that farmer took his life in June. He ended his life. He shot himself, and suicide among the farmers in the Waikato that year was probably at one of the worst it had ever been. Also, the payout had dropped down as well, and I mean, I don't even care about it, so I don't know. I get a little bit emotional now and again, just well, these guys know, but I was really struggling. I'd stopped sleeping. I'd gone to the farm owner and said, "Man, we're in trouble. We're this is really, really hard." And he said, "Mate, you've farmed yourself into it. You can farm yourself out of it. Nothing to do with me." That was the sort of which didn't help. And I was in a pretty a dark situation. Now, if I had known that in 3 or 4 weeks' time, the weather would warm right up, the rain stopped, and we did actually get through spring okay. We calved down, and it was no major problems. Yeah, it was difficult, but we got through okay. A couple of years later, we got a really good, bigger share milking job. We had real easy winters, and the payout came back up. And we ended up buying, 5 years after that dark situation, we ended up buying our own farm. That was 25 years ago. We're still on that farm today. Now, back in this June that I'm talking about, we didn't have any kids then. But if we had known that in 10 years' time, you're going to buy your own farm, you're going to rear your kids up there, and they're going to have a cool little school up the road. And then in 5 years' time after that, you're going to be completely freehold. And then in 30 years' time, you've just had 3 of the best seasons that you've ever had. The payout is the best in history in the world for dairy farming. You're going to belong to the coolest church in New Zealand that you helped plant, and life is going to be really, really good. Now, if I had known that when I was at my lowest in the middle of June, exactly 30 years ago, do you think it would have helped me? See, I didn't know any of that. I thought, at one stage here, I thought, man, we're not even going to get through. Because of our debt levels, if we lose a significant number of cows and stuff, we're done. But if I had known the future, it would have made a massive difference. I would have been going out there, yeah, this is hard, but it's not going to last. And I know we're going to get through it because, do you know what I mean? So if we go to the next slide, Zach, how can we cope how can we prepare for persecution? Jesus, this is the Beatitudes. This is the start of the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Well, what does that say? If you're being persecuted for righteousness, the kingdom of heaven's going to be yours. Does that change things? For us people here who have had maybe a hard time in some of the churches that we've belonged to in the past because of our strong conviction and belief in Jesus, check this out. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. That's happened to me. Anybody? It's happened to, I see, is it Mark? Marcus. Marcus shaking his head. Have you ever had that, Lance? You ever been falsely, persecuted? People saying, well, this is what you believe, but, well, it's not quite right. If you guys, I know Kayla and Zach have. So let's read on. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you, which is exactly what, going back to Acts chapter 7, that's exactly what Stephen was saying. You guys are your ancestors persecuted the prophets. And so if people are, if we are suffering any form of persecution, rejoice and be glad. So for me, that's a game changer. And when I head out on the street, and I love it, I think it is such a huge blessing. In fact, this week, I was out on Tuesday, and I had a guy come up to me. I was preaching. This guy come right up to me and stood about a metre from me and just gave me a very strange look. He wasn't threatening, but he certainly wasn't smiling either. And as it turns out, when I finished up, he was an undercover policeman. He was actually the sergeant of the police station in Cambridge, and he came up to me because he had had people ringing on Tuesday saying, this guy is breaking the law and the police have to go and deal with him. So he went out there to check out what I was doing, and he came up to me, shook my hand afterwards, and he wanted to know what I was doing. So I explained what I was doing, and he said, bro, you're doing a good job. He wasn't a Christian, and he said, you're not doing anything wrong, and you can carry on doing that. So I'm in a country where I can go into the towns, I can share the good news, and the authorities of the country are like, it's all good. So that is such a blessing. And when people, throw an egg at me or whatever, or that, they might put on their horn or whatever, and you will receive persecution if you go out on the street. It's just the way that it goes. What do? Rejoice and be glad, for that, for great is your reward in heaven. So we can cope with persecution because we know one day, just like the dairy farming situation that I was in, and now we've come right through it, one day our hope is that we're going to be here on this renewed earth, and all of the bad stuff is going to be gone. And I'm not going to be limping anymore with arthritis. It'll be life as it should be. Is there another slide after that, Zach? No, that's it. So now we can either have one group here or maybe a couple of groups. We can break into a couple of smaller groups and share how our week's gone. We can pray for each other if there's people there that need prayer. And I think just as we do that, it'd be really good for us in our groups just to pray for our brothers and sisters in other parts of the world that are being heavily persecuted, and there will be Christians today who will lose their life, and they do have families. It is a real thing that's going on. But yeah. So anyway, that's us.